Hello, good human. I'm Nim Deeswart, and this is Return on Wisdom.
He's only the second male born in my family 15 years, so he's only the second, so he was very loved. Anyway, subsequently, he just wasn't thriving, and he wasn't meeting his milestones in terms of weight. I kept taking him back to the doctor, I could take him to the nurse. No, he's fine, but intrinsically I knew something was wrong, and I knew something was very wrong. I get emotional thinking about it. And I think, and I kept taking him back, and they said, oh, no, he's fine. And then I think it was about the third time I took him to the doctor, and they looked at his head circumference and said, oh yeah, he's jumped about 60 percentiles, you need to go to Lismore Base Hospital. And then I knew something was really wrong. You can feel it. You just know. I've got good intuition. And anyway, they came in and they did an ultrasound of his head, and the room filled up with all these, must have been about 10 people in the room. And then I thought, fuck, something's really fucking wrong. Like, if all these people are in this room, they're using this as a teaching moment. So I'm here knowing something's wrong. And then this beautiful paediatrician came up and put his hand on my shoulder, and I said, what's going on? And he said, we found a mass on your son's brain. And I studied science, and I was like, what? Like, what's a mass? I didn't know. And I said, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to do something. They go, oh, we're going to put you in a helicopter and get you to Brisbane. And then I thought, okay. And then I knew it was almost like being very much validated. Anyway, they put some drains in him because he had lots of fluid on the brain. Like, he was hours away from death because he had so much fluid on his brain that the fluid was actually pushing down on his brainstem. Brainstem's vital to keep your heart rate, your breathing. So I knew it's almost like you have this, when you have a child, you have this energetic bond. Anyway, so we were airlifted to Brisbane. I just remember there wasn't a nurse who could go in the helicopter with us, so they put this paediatrician who was a registrar. And at this stage, I only knew that there was a mass on his brain. And then I remember us coming in off the helipad from the hospital, going down into the emergency department, and this paediatrician, who thought she was pretty shit hot, swung the doors open. At the top of her voice, she announced to the paediatric emergency department, pediatric cranial cancer. So from then on, I was like, my baby's got cancer. They had a good investigation. It turns out in this little 10-week-old head, there was a tumour the size of a golf ball or a small mandarin, which is huge, He's only 10 weeks old. He's only got 330 mils of blood in his whole body. They said pretty much this is cancer, and, he's going to have to radiation and chemotherapy. And if he survives, he's this big, he's tiny. I'm still breastfeeding him. Like, I remember the disassociation, like I wasn't totally left my body, like anybody who's been through extreme trauma will tell you. And I was watching it like it was a movie, like a horror film. It was so scary. It was so scary. Because you don't know, right? You're completely handing your power over to these medical professions, and they really don't know. They're not going to know what it is until they go in. They're going to do a biopsy of a tumour. So anyway, for 9 days I had this drain in him, taking out the fluid so that it would be safe for them to operate, because with the fluid his brain had been pushed down so far that this is now what we're dealing with, the damage to his brain. So anyway, they went in, and the most beautiful neurosurgeon that just was unbelievably kind, and they went in to remove the tumour and to see what sort of tissue it was. And anyway, it turned out to be the best possible outcome. It was completely benign, and it was actually floating within the ventricles. There was only one part of the tumour that was attached to a vein, which they couldn't remove. So to hear that he did not have cancer, he was not going to have radiation, he was not going to have chemotherapy, it was just like, it was like a miracle. I think in that moment, I thought I knew what joy was, but nothing like when that neurosurgeon came out into that waiting room and told us, like, that was like, There are really no real words to describe it. And it was never mentioned to us, the deficits that might have happened. And I remember going to see our first OT, and I remember her saying to me, "Oh, you know, your son's got cerebral palsy." And I was just like, "Excuse me?" I can't remember what I said to her. I was more or less really angry that she had called my son, who was a brain tumour survivor, someone who had cerebral palsy. So I think then I was very much in denial about the deficits. And I remember my paediatrician saying, "Look, your son's got cerebral palsy," but it just didn't register. I just was like, "No, I don't want to take that label on," like thinking, "Oh, he'll come good and we'll get him some therapy." So I remember them pushing and pushing for this diagnosis, because it was attached to funding. Once your child's got this diagnosis, he's got this label, you can then go and get funding to help him get the therapy he needs. So it's kind of like this. He must have been 5 months old, and I didn't take the diagnosis on until he was like 2 or 3, because I wasn't mentally, after what I'd been through, then to turn around and say, "Okay, your son has now got issues with his cerebral function, his brain function." It was a lot to take in, because I was in shock. I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I was fragmented as a person. Like, looking back at him, I don't even know how I functioned from day to day. Yeah, it was extremely traumatizing. Yeah, and you don't know how you get through it. But I also had a toddler. Like, I had Toria, who was a toddler, and I also had him. But yeah, progressively, you know, from that first diagnosis, I mean, Tio's now 15 now, and I mean, we have collected diagnoses like a lepidopterist would collect butterflies. I think we're up to about 8 or 9, and the most recent one, he was reassessed this year for a neuropsych, because it was very much more than cerebral palsy. I mean, he's been diagnosed with an intellectual disability as well. And, you know, every sort of behavioural acronym you can think of, ASD, ADD, opposition defiance disorder. But probably the most challenging that we faced this year, it was his cerebral palsy and intellectual disability were upgraded to an acquired brain injury. Probably in the most simplest form, I'd say, think Dory from Finding Nemo. There's just his brain, you and I can think laterally and process things and plan things and look at the watch and say, "Okay, well, this time I've got to do this." He's untethered. So his brain just goes around in loops. I mean, he will do something, he will take his medicine and then put his cup down, and then 30 seconds later he will say, "Mum, have I had my medicine?" So he has no working memory. And because of that, there's a lot of anxiety around, you know, a lot of the time he doesn't know where he is or what he's doing. I mean, I get that. I'm perimenopausal. I go to the fridge and open it and think, "Oh, what did I come to the fridge for?" But that's his life. But having said that, I still have him. He's not perfect, but he is happy. You know, he has a beautiful life. You know, he's just got this beautiful little job at the butcher shop, and because he looks completely normal. He suffers from what we call hidden disabilities. So to look at him, he looks like a normal, robust, handsome 15-year-old. But what's going on for him is so complex. There's so many layers to it. He developed a little bit of an obsession with the butcher because it anchors into the world. He can go up there every day, and he used to sit on the bench and watch them work. And the owner noticed and sort of said, "Oh, you know, would you like to come be my wash-up boy?" Thinking that he was normal, you know, but he liked to do an apprenticeship, and I thought I'd just get him in. But they've just embraced him. He does have a really good heart and a really good spirit. He just has a lot of extra challenges.
And how did that make you feel when he was embraced by other?
Oh my God, I tell you, it really, the joy. I mean, it was very much accidental that he'd gone in there. I think they did think they were getting a wash-up boy, but once they realised, I remember dreading, you know, when he first went in there, and then going in the next day, and Trev, the owner, was like, he said to me, "Oh, Dee, wow, you deserve a medal." And you can't really explain, like, he's got all these things going on, but it's not until you actually in the vicinity or in a situation where you're needing him to follow instructions and I just thought that'd be the end of it. But no, they just embraced him, and, you know, it just restored my faith in humanity and community. Because when you have a son with really complex, I mean, first when you have a sick child, your world shrinks. It's tiny. Your circle's small, the people you can trust, because people don't know what to say. Like when you say to someone, he had a brain tumor, I'm so sorry, or he's got a disability, I'm so sorry. It's like, I know a lot of times people don't have the language, but I think what I've seen is people see disability as such a really sad thing that they need to be sorry for. It's like, disabled people are just people.
Nearly 20% of our population.
I know, it's crazy, right? 1 in 4.
Yeah.
There's a long way to go for us for inclusion. And that's why I was so blown away, because these are just regional, really simple men that like to eat meat, fish, ride horses. And I think that was the really beautiful, pivotal point, because they didn't have all these expectations. And when they knew that he wasn't going to be capable of what they needed him to do, instead of, saying, oh no, this is not going to work, they were like, we have to make this work. And it's become his life. Like he does 2-hour shifts a week, and it's all he talks about. He knows exactly what the roster is, who's working when. He gets up in the morning and before he goes to school, he rides up to the shop and he looks in to make sure who's working is supposed to be working. So he's so much more than just a job. It's like they have given him a sense of purpose, a feeling of belonging, which a lot of children with disabilities, they just don't get. The world is crazy and beautiful, and it's really difficult for even able-bodied people like you and I to say, I feel like I belong. I'm anchored within this community. But for young people with disabilities, some people go through their whole lives
never feeling like
that. And I'm sure they've taught him a lot about themselves, because you have to find this inner, almost, I wouldn't say godlike, but you have to, having someone like Tigo in your life, you have to transcend everything that because there is nothing that he is going to do that you've seen before or that is expected, or you have to live in the moment, and you have to be completely present and completely mindful. It's almost like you're tuning in. You want him, when he becomes dysregulated, you want to sit with him and get him to tune into your nervous system to bring him down, because he's so anxious all the time, because he can't make sense of the world, because he can't even make sense of what's going on inside him. As he's gotten older, and that first letting him go and go into the butcher shop was my first letting go of him, where I let him out into the world. And I was so anxious, like I thought I was going to die. I thought, oh my God, because you've got to let them go. And I tell you, the trust, because I trust them, and I know those men, and I know that they're good men, that they are kind men. And so asking me now 2 years on, I would say that there is so much kindness and so much beauty in humanity. I think we've forgotten that there is so much, because there is so much nastiness and so much division, that we kind of, like as humans, right, we gravitate towards the negative, because that's how we've evolved as a species. That's why we're still here, because we've always been on the lookout. We still gravitate to the negatives. Humanity is so nasty. Humans are so horrible to each other. But then you can have just one person, this one butcher shop owner on the North Coast, just be so kind that it completely changes your opinion about humanity. And that's just one person. If we have 2 people,
only takes one.
It only takes one, and then that proliferates, and then it's, he's kind to Tio, and then I take that on, and then I'm kinder and more loving and open to 2 other people, and that's all it takes, is this butterfly, this ripple effect, that if kindness and compassion and patience, these beautiful human traits that sometimes we forget because we're so focused on trying to put food on the table and trying to make a living and have a career and take care of, that we forget that there's so much of this out there that we're not actively looking for it because we're so busy. But I think there is so much, and I think there's so much capacity for it.
Thank you for joining us on Return on Wisdom. If this resonates with you, please support the project by subscribing. You're amongst the first believers helping us create a world that listens, learns, and values lived experience wisdom. Every like, comment, and subscription is a powerful reminder to keep this mission alive. Your support today makes all the difference. Thank you.